Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Uh, we're going to stop sharing the screen in a second, and April and Kevin from Dyer Harris are also going to be joining us. I'm Roberta Pereira. That's how I usually introduce myself, but I feel in this group of people, I can say that my name is Roberta Pereira, which is actually how I pronounce my name. I am originally from Brazil, which is actually where I am right now, but I am currently the producing director of the Playwrights realm and one of the people managing the International Theater Makers Award. And as part of this award that we're doing for the realm, we are also conducting webinars to help international artists to come to America, work in America. And also later on, we're going to be conducting some webinars to help international American artists or American companies that want to work with international artists to understand what are all the things they're going to need to know about this in terms of visas, in terms of taxes, and all of that. So that's something that we're going to be doing in the future. So if you have worked with American companies or American artists and you would like them to know some more information about that, you should tell them to keep a lookout because those will be coming soon. So I'm going to introduce April and Kevin very soon, but I also just wanted to go through the agenda. We're going to be here for about an hour. And Kevin and April are these incredible lawyers that were actually my lawyers when I did my green card application process a few years ago. And they're going to be taking us through the process and the content of applying for an O-1 visa. And they're going to use an example of an artist, a playwright, I believe, to tell us all a little bit more about how that works. And then I'm going to be talking a little bit about the International Theater Makers Award, which is this award that the Playwrights Realm and Dyer Harris has started. And then after that, we are going to be opening for questions. And in case you haven't attended one of these Zoom webinars before, the way that you do this, if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's these two little bubbles and it says Q&A. And if you click on it, you can type in a question. And then I'm asking the other participants to upvote questions. So if you look at a question that you're like, oh, I was wondering that as well. If you give it a thumbs up, it means that the question will go up in the ranking and we'll know that that's an important question for this group of people. If you have your own question or if you have comments on other questions, please use that Q&A. We'll be looking at that. And we also have some questions that we've collected from just experience with different kinds of international artists. So we can also add those to the mix as well. So that's kind of how this will go. We are also recording this, so it will be available later. And so before I turn this over to Kevin and April to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about the process, I do want to have an idea of who's in the room. And so we're going to use the polling feature. And so I'm going to actually launch a poll. And it's super easy. There's going to be 3 different questions. There's actually 3 different polls. So I'm doing that right now. And I'm going to leave it up for a few minutes. So answer the question of where are you currently located? Okay, and we have most of the people in. Just a few more seconds. Okay, so most of the people in the United States and some other North America, Asia, Europe as well. And now a second poll about a visa category. And we're curious to know about what visa category, if you are in the United States, what visa category are you under? So also that will help us answer some of the questions or, target a little bit the conversation. So I'm leaving this up for a few more seconds. So lots of OPTs, optional practical training. I've been there before, certainly. And so we can also add some information about that. And then lastly, we're just curious how many people are actually working theater that are here today. This is not a prerequisite for this webinar, but we were just curious to know, to find out. So I'm going to leave this up for a little bit longer. Okay, and we have most of the people in. So big majority working in theater, but also other fields. So thank you so much for that. We just wanted to have a little bit of an idea of who was in the room, and this was very helpful. And so without further ado, April and Kevin, if you can turn on your video and join me here so we can talk a little bit more about the process. Okay.
All right, can you hear?
Hello. Yes, can hear you perfectly. And so before we start, I just wanted the two of you to give you a little background on yourselves. Of course, everybody has your bio, but also just like, you know, your backgrounds as lawyers, especially around immigration.
Okay. Do you want to start?
Sure. My name is April Harris, and I have been working in the field of immigration for more than a decade. I've lost track of how many years I've been doing this. Before that, though, I was a labor lawyer, and I worked for many of the unions in the entertainment field. So I already came to immigration work with an understanding of some of the labor issues involved with this process. O-1s are our passion. There's no question about it. We love doing this work. I want to say from the outset, thank you everyone for being here. And thank you, Roberta and Miranda, so much for everything you've been doing. I want to also apologize in advance. I have a way of making this sound like a more complicated process than it can be, because I love the twists and turns of it. And I always want to make the most of everything we can to make every petition as strong as it can be. And now, Kevin.
Okay. My name is Kevin Dyer. I have been doing immigration work for, let's call it 23 years. I started out as an international corporate lawyer focused on Latin America. And that morphed into immigration work, which in turn has morphed into a focus on immigration work for artists and investors and professionals. And April's right. O-1s and working with artists of all kinds now is our passion and our joy. And that's what brings us here today. Okay.
So Kevin is going to speak first about the substantive aspects of the O-1 process. But before we get into that, we have a very important legal proviso to share with you.
Yeah, this is just a quick disclaimer. We're not today presenting personalized legal advice. We're not your lawyers as a result of anything that'll happen today. What we are doing is empowering you with general information regarding the O-1 process. When the time comes for you to approach the O-1 process, we strongly advise you to seek qualified legal counsel. And by qualified legal counsel, I mean a lawyer or a law firm with significant O-1 experience. A lot of immigration lawyers don't do many O-1s. And it runs on value judgments and evidentiary requirements that are really quite different from other areas of immigration law. So I can't stress that enough to you. Whether you come to us or you come to somebody else, find out that they've got a background in O-1s. Okay.
All right, Kevin.
Let's get underway then. First of all, what does an O-1 let you do? And it's both simple and nuanced at the same time. The O past extraordinary ability, whatever the scope that is, limited by what we can document about what your future engagements will be. Okay, and I'll try to give some meaning to that with some real concrete examples in just a few minutes. But let's talk about what we have to show. What we have to show in an O-1 petition in order to win the approval for you that we all want. I have a way of looking at an O-1 process that I think of as a 3-room house. And I'll tell you why I think of it that way. The Immigration Service has very recently added a new set of requirements called a totality review, totality of the evidence review. It's all quite new. Even though it's been in the regs forever and a day, they've been highlighting this of late. And that constitutes a porch on my 3-room house. And I'll explain where that fits in just a moment. The first room, and to some degree, in my view, the most important room of this 3-room house, is the room in which we document your past achievements. Okay? The Immigration Service has a particular way of looking at your career. They want to see where you have played a leading or starring role in distinguished productions or events in the past. Okay, and we go to great lengths to show both that a particular production, let's say a theatrical production, was distinguished and that your role was leading or starring. Okay, sometimes that's more complex than in others. The second room. Go ahead.
You know, one thing that is important to remember is that when the Immigration Service refers to leading or starring, those are words that usually refer to the actors in a play.
Right.
But leading and starring also encompasses the director, the lighting designer, the costume designer, the playwright, all of the people who are necessary to making this show happen. So don't be misled by the language leading or starring. It means people across the board who are in leadership, creative positions.
Yeah, and when I'm trying to analyze this particular role, this particular issue, I look to the centrality of your role and the contribution that you made to the final production. And sometimes we deal with assistant scenic designers or assistant costume designers or this or that. And what we do in those cases is we don't ignore the title, but we say, what did you really do? What did you really contribute to the production, and how is it evidenced in the final product? Right.
Let's go beyond the credits. Often we don't have to, but sometimes we have to.
Sometimes we must. Okay. We document your past career with press, promotional materials, and testimonial letters that we prepare when we handle a case. These are
sometimes the individuals prepare them themselves with guidance, but they really need to be, most importantly, accurate and honest.
Accurate and honest, and the letters themselves satisfy one criterion. We have to satisfy 3 for an O-1. They can also be used as evidence of the fact that you played a leading or starring role in a distinguished production. Okay. The whole O-1 petition is like a trial on paper, and these testimonial letters, that's expert testimony at the trial. They have to be, these are letters that have to be drafted with care. They truly do.
So that's the first room.
That's the first room. The second room.
Track.
I know, keeping track of this house tour. The second room is your relationship with a sponsor, which in the O-1 world, different from other work visas in the United States, in the O-1 world can run a whole gamut of relationships.
And what are the requirements for a sponsor or petitioner for an O-1 petition?
They're really schematic. The sponsor has to be a U.S. citizen, a U.S. green card holder, or a U.S. based organization or company. Okay, so that encompasses quite a bit, and there's all kinds of variations. Or is the sponsor going to employ you part-time, full-time, from time to time, or is the sponsor merely going to be a representative of your future engagements, who will really be your employers, if you will? That's the second room. The final room is your future engagements. We document those with deal memos or letters of engagement. We have to show again about the future that you are going to play a leading or starring role in distinguished productions. Somewhat difficult if you think about it, coming up with a description of your role in something that hasn't happened yet. But we do it, and we do it effectively, and we do it all the time. People say, well, how many of these deal memos, how many of these future engagements do I need? And the thing is not how many, but for how long. The Immigration Service allows us to apply for a 3-year approval period, and that's how we want to document your future. And we do that in the course of these deal memos. And so that's what we want. We want coverage of the 3-year period, frequently with players in the theatrical world that want to engage you again and again and again, even if they don't know all the details of the future projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the key problems in theater cases that we always find is that even before COVID, and theaters and theater companies would at best be able to project into the future 1 year. And the trick was establishing to the Immigration Service that in year 2 and in year 3 of a petition, you're still going to be engaged in various ways. And our experience is that the Immigration Service accepts kind of declining detail as we move into the future, so that you may well serve as a lighting designer at the public theater, and the public doesn't exactly know what those productions are going to be, but they're looking at least 2 shows for you, which would be great. So what I'm saying is that in every petition, we grapple with the realities of your field.
Okay.
Okay. So was that 3 rooms?
That's basically my 3 rooms. Let me just briefly talk about the porch. The Immigration Service now wants us, after we get through satisfying the criteria, and there's one extra credit criterion, and I'll throw that in, that you may have played a critical role for distinguished organizations like a theater group or something like that, and that you will in the future. And that gives us a 4th criterion to aim for when we only need 3. But this final totality of the evidence approach, the Immigration Service wants to pull away from the criteria, that we're no longer just checking boxes. Yes, I satisfied that. Yes, I've got that. To say, are you, in the totality of evidence, are you an artist of extraordinary ability? Have you received national or international recognition? Have you approached your career with distinction? And this is, like I say, even though this has been in the regulations, it's a new focus, and we plan on grappling with that. The precise burdens and the ways that we'll do that, we don't know precisely right now. But I can see all kinds of ways that we can meet this and achieve success.
So what I think Kevin has done is given you kind of a conceptual understanding of what goes into an O-1. It includes records of your past. It includes engagements relating to the future. It's all tied together with a petitioner. What I want to do is walk you through the stages between, I think I want to move to the United States and work, to I'm here in the United States and I can now work. I'm thinking that there are 4 phases to this process. And the first one is prepare yourself. Preparing yourself means a lot of different things for different people. And a lot of it goes to making sure you have an up-to-date passport, updating and making sure you have a very detailed CV, getting that box out from under your bed with all of your press, getting yourself more familiar with your career in some objective way. The second part of preparing yourself is contacting a lawyer. And Kevin mentioned how important it is to find a lawyer who is really experienced in the field of O-1s. One thing that I would always suggest is when talking to a lawyer, make sure it's a lawyer that is going to actually issue to you a retainer agreement. That should be in language that you understand, that tells you what you're getting with your money and what you're not getting. And you should be allowed to discuss this retainer agreement with your lawyer to make sure that everyone understands from the beginning what's happening and what your goals are, when you need to file, what you need. You need to have a very solid relationship of communication, because this is not a cookie cutter process. Every O-1 is very, very different. And I think this is why we love doing them, is because it really means the attorney and you have to together get into the deepest molecular level of your practice, your future, and your goals. Because you want to make sure that an O-1 serves your needs, and your lawyer can help you figure that out from the very beginning. I do want to say that an important thing to remember is that the O-1 process, which can sound very daunting and detailed, and you feel like you're being judged, things like that, should not be a negative experience. It's a lot of work, but it should be a very positive experience in which your career, all that you've done, your record of achievements, is something that you get to see in a really objective way, and to understand the presentation of your case and the community that supports you in a new and better way. I've had a lot of clients say that, you know, it was hard to go through this process, but that they came out a different kind of artist than they were when they went in. So phase one should be a kind of a getting to know you with your lawyer. And phase one will also involve your lawyer sending you questionnaires. What is your work? What have you done? Where are you? What kind of visa do you have now? Things like that. Answer it very completely and you'll be doing yourself a really good favor. Phase two is when your lawyer actually gets to work. Your lawyer now prepares the documents for your petition. That means first setting up a strategy for your case, kind of figuring out with a big picture, because this is a puzzle that has a lot of different pieces, and understanding how they're going to fit together and what we're going to be relying on is critical from the very beginning. So your lawyer should be discussing the strategy, the narrative, the story of your case with you as they create it. And then all the pieces will fall into place beautifully. After the development of strategy comes time for drafting, drafting contracts, drafting letters of recommendation, if that's something that your lawyer does, drafting petitioner documents, drafting press lists. There's a lot of drafting involved in creating a solid petition, because we are actually presenting your case to an individual, a human being at the Immigration Service who wants to be told a story. And we want to try and help them understand your story and feel proud of approving your case. So the second phase is when the lawyer really gets to work. The second part of the second phase, when all the letters have come back and everyone has signed everything and there's all these contracts and you've developed an itinerary for 3 years, is the submission of the petition to the labor union that has jurisdiction over the work that you do. And because people today don't stay in their lane and many people do many different kinds of things, it can mean submitting your petition to several different labor unions. For playwrights, there's several choices, including the Dramatists Guild. For directors, there's SDC. For designers, there's the IA. For actors, there's Actors Equity and AGMA, and the list goes on and on. There are a lot of choices. And if you're also planning on working in film, then you're going to need the film unions that are comparable to the ones that I just said, like SAG-AFTRA, the Directors Guild, and you're also going to need a letter from a management organization, and that's just for film. Usually it's the AMPTP, which is the Hollywood Producers Association, but if you're sticking to theater, that's not necessary at all. And then within a week or two, the unions will send you a letter that is usually what we call a non-objection letter, where they state that they do not object to the filing of this petition. It means a lot to the Immigration Service to see that. And that is phase 2. Phase 3 is we've got everything together in a great big binder, and it's several hundred pages that has a lot of beautiful colors and wonderful press about you and your work. And it is submitted then to the Immigration Service. The USCIS will review your case. Along the way, they may have questions in a document called a request for evidence. It's not a pleasant process, but many requests for evidence can be overcome. The adjudicators of the Immigration Service, some of them have not received adequate training and don't know what they're looking for or how things are supposed to work. And it is your lawyer's job to try to explain in the gentlest terms possible how it should work and how your case should be approved. We don't see a lot of RFEs here, but when we do see them, we go to town and make sure that the immigration officer feels absolutely content to approve your case at that point. Right, obviously in the last 2 or 3 years, the number of RFEs that have been issued by the Immigration Service are on the rise. We are certainly hoping that 2021 brings a change in the attitude of the Immigration Service with respect to O-1s. Of course, phase 3 ends hopefully with an approval. You receive an approval notice, a document which is simply a 1-page or 2-page green document which indicates that your case has been approved. Now you're not in O-1 at that point, and that brings us to phase 4, which is actually transitioning you from wherever you are and whatever you are, whether it's an F1, F1 OPT, H1B, or not in the United States in any way, transitioning you to O-1. Now, if you're here in the United States on ESTA, you're going to need to follow the consular procedure. If you're not in the United States, and this is the basic procedure, you will need to make an appointment at a US consulate, meet with them, show them your passport, show them your approval notice, and they may ask you a few questions about your approval and your petition, and they will issue to you a visa. They stamp a page into your passport, which is now an entry document that permits you to enter the United States. If you're Canadian, the procedure is a little simplified. You don't need to go to a consulate. You can just handle it at the airport or at the bridge. But that is the procedure for entering the United States. There is a shortcut for people that are present in the United States in a different status. That if you are in O-1 or if you are in H-1B or F-1 status, you can transition to a new phase in O-1 in a process called change of status or extension of status that enables you to just transition by virtue of your approval notice, and that permits you to continue in the United States. There's actually an I-94 form at the bottom of your approval that indicates that your case has an approved change of status as well. The next time you leave the United States to re-enter in O-1 status, you're going to need to go through that consular process before re-entering. I like to think of O-1 status as a kind of magic cloak, that you need to have put on your shoulders. You do it by entering the United States with an O-1 visa, or by transitioning by change of status or extension of status to O-1. By leaving the United States, then you're no longer in O-1 status because you're not here. But the process, I think, is really complicated and confusing for most people unless you think of it as a magic cloak. Do you think of it as a magic cloak?
I do.
Okay, that's very good. So at the end of the day, you started out thinking, I really need to get to the United States to take this job. And because now you've been granted an O-1 visa, you've flown to the United States, and you are permitted, when they stamp your passport, to follow that plan. The O-1 is a fairly flexible visa in many, many ways, not unlimited ways, but in many, many ways, that does allow you to pursue your dreams, your creative dreams here in the United States. I think that wraps up the process.
I think so.
Thank you so much, April and Kevin. That was wonderful. And we already have some questions coming up, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the International Theater Makers Award first, and then we can jump into the questions. So the Playwrights realm, actually, since you're both still on, if you can tell me a little bit, April, actually the International Theater Makers Award was created out of an email you sent me. So can you tell us the story, please?
It was the summer of 2020. And of course, for Kevin and me, trying to think of ways that we could contribute to making our world a more just place, we realized that because we have skill in O-1 visas, we wanted to find a way to use our skill to enhance diversity in New York theater. And my first call, of course, was to Roberta to say, how on earth are we going to do this? Do you have any thoughts? Has anyone ever done this before? We wanted to somehow do our work in an even more political way.
Yeah, so after I got that email, we had a Zoom conversation, as all these conversations go nowadays. And we started coming up with this idea. As some of you that are on this call might know, you might not be familiar with my organization, the Playwrights Realm. We're an off-Broadway theater company and also artist service organization. We are really focused on playwrights normally, but we actually have been changing a little bit in terms of the work that we do. And this season specifically, we have really changed since we don't have any productions, especially, in New York. I think it's going to be a little while until we have live productions again, especially indoors. But we decided to use that as an opportunity. So we decided to get the resources that we would usually spend on a production and turn all of that into service to artists. And I started thinking about the different artists that we haven't been able to serve as much in our past. And we have worked with immigrant artists before. Actually, 2 of our playwrights that we've worked with out of the close to 70 are immigrant playwrights living abroad currently. But we decided that there was more we could do. And of course, because of the experience that I had of years of, going through this, and I actually applied for my green card. It was very close to the last election. And April and Kevin, I don't know if you remember that, we were prepping, we were getting everything together. And I remember this very clearly. I don't know, I think it might've been one of you said, you know what, I think we need to put this in before the election results come in. I think we should do this. And so we actually ended up going much faster. Our timeline was a little bit different and we sped it up to be able to put that in. And I ended up being a great thing. I was approved, of course, but you don't know. Because as we know, it's a very tricky time to be an immigrant in America. I don't need to tell anybody in this call this. And so this is what we are attempting to do. So the International Theater Makers Award, all the information is on our website. You received it probably in a confirmation, but we'll also plop it in the chat. And the idea is that we're going to have a panel of experts review applications. And we are going to be giving 3 no-cost O-1 petitions, up to 3, at least 1 playwright because of the Playwrights Realm mission. And so this is our, piece of it. And then, of course, as I mentioned, also these panels, trying to give as much information as possible to anybody who's interested. So that's kind of the eligibility survey, which is the first part, because as April and Kevin mentioned, there's a lot in terms of even just being eligible for this kind of visa for the O-1. And so the eligibility survey, which is the first part of the process, is due November 1st. So there's still 10 days. It's not very long. We already have a few applications in, but we're expecting quite a few more. So if you're on this call, if you know somebody who would be interested in this, please let them know about this. We are going to now go into the questions and answers. There's quite a few Q&A, so I'm just going to go through the top. We have one from anonymous attendee. If you don't have any credits as a leading designer, but have many credits as an assistant designer, associate designer, do you even have a chance of getting an O-1 approved?
I'm happy to answer that. They say the devil is in the details. There are so many ways of establishing that someone played a leading role in a particular production. Sometimes we have to show that you are responsible for various things which were critical to the show's success. So my answer is credits are not the be all and end all for determining whether somebody has played a leading role in a production. I think the answer is explore your options and see how it goes.
And dive into the details, dive into the contribution and how we'll prove the contribution. Typically, we prove the contribution with testimonial letters from the main designer.
Sometimes the main designer, whoever got the credit as the lead designer, was unable to fulfill their duties, and you had to take a truly leading role, or that your role as associate designer or assistant designer truly was a leading role. Everything comes down to the details.
Right.
I wouldn't lose hope.
Not at all.
Another question, also anonymous. Does the sponsor have to be someone related to you professionally, or can they be a citizen/green card holder that just plays the part of a sponsor that way?
Okay, it's possible to have a US citizen or green card holder sponsor who has no connection with you whatsoever and is not in your field. Conceptually though, you should think of it this way, that the Immigration Service is focused on who will be your employers, what they call either employers or third-party employers. And the concept behind this notion of a US citizen, let's say, a US citizen sponsor who is not in your field and you'll not collaborate with him or her, that person is a designee of that solar system of future engagements, these future third-party employers that you will have, and they will all designate this person to file the petition in part on their behalf.
There are actually lawyers who charge a small fee to serve as a petitioner, have no role to play in your petition. They're routinely approved because it depends on the facts relating to your case rather than who the petitioner is.
And these are people who do this as a service to the arts, really, and it's really quite useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question from Amun, and a few people are interested in the answers to this too. When is the best time to start the process of an O-1 visa? How long does it take?
Well, I want to say this, that especially for people who are on OPT, the best thing you can do is first talk to somebody when you're starting OPT. Obviously, you're not going to want to apply for a little while, but we find people do benefit from some guidance as to how they should spend their time on OPT. So so that's a preliminary kind of guidance process, but we really encourage people to do it. I think it helps tremendously. But preparing an O-1 from the very beginning to the end can take months and months and months, depending on how long people take to respond to their, their questionnaires and whether it takes a long time to arrange a petitioner. But people who have their ducks in a row, who are ready to go and got everything set up and all they have to do is fill out their questionnaires and send us their list of press, we can get a petition out probably in 6 weeks to get it to the union. The unions take about 2 weeks. So that sounds like 8 weeks before you want to submit. Does that help?
Yep, great. Another question here from Ron. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. My passport expired during my current O-1 period, and I can't update it at the consulate because of COVID. Will that jeopardize my future applications?
I do want to say that having an unexpired passport is a requirement for maintaining your status in this country. So I encourage you to do whatever you can to renew your passport as soon as possible. I do not know, but I would doubt that that a gap would be something that anybody would ever know about, but I strongly encourage you to get that renewed as soon as possible.
And I think it's a good idea for everybody who's on this call, who's not a US person, to look at their passport. Just look at it today, tomorrow, the next day. And if it's about to expire within the next year, think about renewing it. I'm just saying, like, sounding like a worried parent here, it's probably a good thing to kind of focus on.
COVID has been a disaster for so many reasons and in so many lives. One of the bizarre things that we've seen is that a lot of people have been unable to, their normal plans and procedures to renew their passport have been completely scuttled. And they're in the same position as Ron, where their passport is expired. They don't know how to figure out how to do it without leaving the United States, which is often dangerous.
And you might not be able to come back, which is a problem depending where you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another, and we've seen so many clients be in this mess. It's just another way, one of the zillion uncountable ways in which COVID has really made life so much harder.
Yep.
Another question here. If you work in both theater and film, do you need to choose one field for O-1 purposes, or can I submit for both fields?
We routinely cover a number of fields. Some work may be on the web, some may be in theater, some may be on TV, some may be in film, some films may be shown in museums, some museums may have performances with films. It's 2020 and everyone's work often covers many different traditionally separate disciplines. You should not have to choose.
Are more disciplines better though? Is there like a tipping point?
What I said before about having that your petition tells your story, it's got to be coherent, it's got to make sense, and it's got to really blow the readers away with how exciting the work is. I don't think that crossing disciplines is a big issue. We've done a lot of petitions for people who's actually multiple, I don't even know how I'm going to say this, multidisciplinarity is their art. So I just think it's fascinating and great. And you just tell your story to your lawyer and make sure they tell it well.
I would say this though, if the rubber band is stretched too much, it will break. So you can't be a set designer and a musician on a single petition, or it would be very difficult to do that.
Right, there are lines, there are places that it'd be hard to cross.
It would be hard to cross. And so sometimes we get people, then they're really polymaths and they're all over the place and they want to be able to do everything. And the Immigration Service is a bit of a barrier.
But we try to tuck in as much as we can. You want your O-1 to liberate you. You want it to be your opportunity to do your thing. And not say, oh, I can't do that because it's not covered by my visa. Like you really want it to embrace your future. My lawyer
forgot to include that.
Right. That would be not good.
That would be not good. That would be not good. We want this to be a springboard, the O-1 to be a springboard for your dreams, for your career.
But just to actually make something clear, which is important during this time of COVID, you are only allowed to work within that discipline and that field under the O-1. Correct.
Right. As defined as reasonably as it can be within the confines of the petition.
But there are so many gray areas. If a petition is for an actor and that actor's petition was for productions in film, it is really not clear to me that they are not permitted to act on stage. I think that here the details of the petition truly matter. We try to build the petition so that it gives you the ability to say, no, this is work that truly is covered by my petition. And there are lots of rules that enable O-1 visa holders to add events and productions to their itinerary. I think that getting an O-1 visa is not the end of the story, that you need to have the ability to understand what your rights are, understand what the petition enables you to do, and to work carefully so that it is as broad as can be. There are, some petitions, if your petition is for Roberta Pereira to work for the Playwrights realm only, then that is going to be the limit of your petition. But there are many different ways to build a petition that builds in more flexibility.
I have a couple of questions here about how long does it take from submitting the application to be issued an O-1, and one specifically about how long the process is taking right now because of COVID. With interviews, are interviews even happening? And so, both regularly and then at this moment in time.
Yeah, the Immigration Service, once you submit a petition, traditionally it was probably under 2 months that you would hear an answer. But they've been affected by COVID also, and the adjudicating officers are working from home. I think it's a much more unpredictable process as a result. And we have had to file more inquiries than we have in the past, saying, this case has been sitting there for 3 months, what's going on? So it's fairly unpredictable how long the USCIS will take to review a petition. There is premium processing, but it's very expensive. And starting today, more expensive than even it has been in the past. And so we're really going to be relying on regular processing. Now, as I said, once you get your approval notice, you often have to go to a consulate to get your visa. And
if it's not a change of status.
That's right. And getting a visa these days is terribly hard because of various travel bans coming out of the White House. And many of the consulates have taken it upon themselves to merge some of the presidential proclamations. So while the consulates are slowly opening up, many of them are not handling visa applications in the absence of an emergency or a national interest exception. Even though O-1 visas should not be covered by most of the bans that are in effect, the consulates have just been very, very slow to handle applications for visas right now. A lot depends on the country you're in. A lot depends on the particular consulate you're planning to go to. That some, within the Schengen region in Europe, for example, some of the consulates are more available than others. It's a really tough time to actually get a visa issued and to travel now to the United States.
And so it's highly advantageous if your petition can be framed as a change of status, perhaps from F1 OPT status, so that you can work, you can continue working, but you do not have to leave the United States to have O-1 status. Right now, that is ideal because travel is as interrupted as if there were a major war going on.
But we want to say this, that we are hopefully at the very end of a very, very rough, very difficult time for people needing visas. For so many reasons, we believe things are changing. And that in the next 6 months, things will start opening again on so many levels. The O-1 visa is a doable, flexible visa that allows people to truly pursue their artistic dreams. And as COVID recedes and as the United States becomes more welcoming again, the O-1 is an option that many people should consider.
I just want to note that we have about 3 minutes, but we started a little late. So I'm going to try to get, because we still have there are more questions coming in. So I want to try to answer them. So if people can stay with us.
Feel free to contact us directly. We're happy to answer informational questions. We have free consultations on Friday afternoons for kind of informational process questions exactly like this.
Right.
Like what's going on out there? Or, how does my case add up? All that kind of stuff.
And April, they can find that information on your website where they can.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like a contact us button.
A little contact form
and we are
perfect.
If this time teaches us anything, it's we've got to all stick together.
Yeah, since I'm going to try to get to a few more questions since I know we have time and whoever can stay with us. There's another one from anonymous attendee. Does the credibility of the sponsor make a stronger case or does it not matter? For example, choosing between my director friend as the sponsor who just graduated from film school versus a production company.
Well, we kind of, have an informal concept in the office of reflected glory. If you've got a sponsor that is impressive, it changes. It shouldn't matter, first and foremost, I'll say that, but it does, because you've got a human being reading this petition at the end of it and at the end of the day. And if we can say the sponsor is really great and they want to collaborate with this artist, and I think it does matter. It's not everything, and sometimes
and it's a huge judgment call. That's
right.
all. You just got to put all the pieces together and see how it fits together.
Right. And so we can come out on different ways, but all things being equal, if you had a really prominent sponsor that adds glory and credibility to your petition, it's probably a good thing, but it's not.
Doesn't hurt.
Doesn't hurt.
Can't hurt.
Couldn't hurt, as the joke used to say. Yes.
We have another question. You addressed timing a little bit. Somebody asked a specific question. My OPT will end in July. When should I start reaching out to my lawyer to start my application?
Oh gosh, I mean, I would say start making contact. If you don't know of a lawyer right now, start searching like in November, December, and start thinking about really sitting down and starting to work with the lawyer in January. This is why. Here's the thing. Let's talk about dates for a second. Okay, we've got a July OPT expiration. You have a 60-day grace period after that. You don't drop dead when your OPT expires, but you can't work legally. And so sometimes people want what I call a back-to-back approval. They've got an OPT expiration date, and they want the next day to be starting in on O-1 status. And to do that, to build in time for perhaps a request for evidence, the time it takes the lawyer to prepare the petition, start really getting underway in January. I'm just saying that.
But also, I want to throw in my plea to people who are in OPT to talk to someone as soon as possible, just to get some kind of guidance on how to use your time in OPT. OPT is so great, and maybe you can get STEM OPT. You know, is there anything technical about your skills? Using OPT well is a fantastic way of building a stronger O1.
Right.
Another question here from Dennis. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right, who's originally from Istanbul, he's saying here, and residing and working on an OPT in New York City. Can I be a playwright actor on the same O1 visa? If so, should I make this clear in my application for the International Theater Award or focus on one field? So I guess two questions. The first one, could you apply for as a playwright actor? We talked about different fields, but you know, those are a little bit two different things. And then the ITA question as well.
I think I'll turn that over to you.
Well, I mean, you know, it's just, it really comes down to the facts. You want to make sure, the question is what you want to be doing in the future. And if it's both acting and writing, you need to look carefully and see whether there's a way to bridge them as a unified practice. You can think of many playwrights who do act. So I don't think it is an outlandish approach, but it is tricky. We've certainly had cases like that where crossing those lines has not been something that the Immigration Service has had a problem with. Certainly if you're acting the plays you wrote, that makes a lot of sense. It's suddenly a completely different approach. So it comes down to the facts. Now, putting that in your ITA application, I think, yes, tell us.
Yeah, I think that for the International Theater Makers Award, we want to have an idea of who you are. And so I think add that, and of course, adding, you know, information. We ask about awards, we ask about, you know, similar to the visa, the award is similar in this way, but I think let us know who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Another question here. Has there been cases approved of O1 visas for students that have just graduated and therefore don't have much experience under their belt, but can get letters from very prominent members of the industry who were their professors?
Well,
another good question.
Let's break it down. Let's break it down. First of all, there's nothing that prevents absolutely about being a student that prevents someone from transitioning from F1 student to O1. Okay, let's just have that, and then let's set that to the side. I divide students in two groups, though, particularly when they're kind of young, is students that have had some sort of a career in their home country, and then have come to the United States, perhaps to a film school or an art school or something like that. And so they've got something to draw on for O1 purposes back in their home country. If you have not been played a leading or starring role in distinguished productions, and a number of them somewhere, an O1 is extremely difficult, if not impossible, particularly in this climate. I frequently, you know, we resist numbers, okay, as absolutes because they're not really in the regulations, but you have to show some critical mass of achievement, particularly now that I'm dealing with a totality of the circumstances at the final thing, my little porch of my house, where I have to say, look, let's stand back. We're not checking the boxes anymore. This person is really extraordinary, and I'll show you why. It's a little difficult if you're just coming out of school without a career.
Truly, the O1 is not about talent, it's about accomplishment. So sometimes the answer is, yeah, you definitely can get an O1, but you may not be able to do it now. That this is, you know, your career is a lifetime thing. And obtaining an O1 directly after school or OPT is not for everyone. It may be that you want to return to your home country or go somewhere else to build up the kind of credits that an O-1 requires.
It's
Just
important.
to clarify, you're talking about college undergraduate, because of course graduate might be a different thing. You might have more experience depending on the graduate program.
Many people come to graduate programs in the United States with an incredible record of achievement under their belt already. Or they had a year of OPT between college and grad school where they did amazing things. Right. There are and I would say this, that sometimes we do talk about student productions because even though the Immigration Service is very reluctant to take cognizance of them, sometimes they are extraordinary productions. This happens a lot in the film world where there's people are making world-class cinema while they're matriculating in school. That should not stop the fact, it shouldn't prevent that from being relevant to their application.
Right. Absolutely.
So I mean,
sorry, go ahead, April.
It's just it's always down to the details. Everyone's case is so different. You need to really talk to somebody who can take a look and say, you know, here's a really great way to look at this.
We had a question here from an anonymous attendee as well. What happens if a petition gets rejected?
Okay, let's imagine that a person is here on OPT following an F1 course of study, and the O-1 petition, we filed it when the OPT was still valid or within the grace period, and all of a sudden we get a denial after the OPT is all expired and the grace period is expired as well. In all likelihood, that person would have to leave the United States, okay, within a short time after a negative decision.
But you can file again. The Immigration Service is not perfect, and sometimes there are reasons for denying a case were not valid. And there's nothing wrong with refiling that exact case, sometimes explaining that the adjudicating officer missed certain very important facts, that there is no black mark, there is no record of denial. I mean, the denial is on the record, but there's no reason to not keep trying.
Right, and we put in petitions, hey, the last time got denied, and this is why it was totally wrong. And resulted in approval. Sometimes though, when the person has left the United States, he or she is also working back in the home country and getting additional components that we then use for the subsequent filing.
And so often denials have nothing to do with the beneficiary. A couple of years ago, there was a lawyer in New York who mishandled a number of petitions, and all those cases were denied. We handled a lot of the people afterwards, and they were all approved. That it was nothing to do with that case. So if your case is denied, don't give up. It's just time to start up again.
Right. Absolutely.
I have a few questions here that are COVID related. We're going to keep going and try to answer some more questions if that's okay with the two of you.
Yeah.
I have a year and a half until the end of my 3-year O-1 visa. So this is a person that already has an O-1, and they are a costume designer, and all of their engagements got canceled due to COVID. So they want to know if it's possible to apply for jobs that are not exactly connected with the performance industry. So for example, could they apply for a job in the fashion industry? So still connected to clothes and but.
What do you think?
A lot depends on the terms of the petition that was submitted and approved. It was a multi-employer petition. Maybe there was some fashion stuff in there already. You're permitted to add in many cases, you're permitted to add new engagements, even if they're not on your itinerary. So there may well be a lot of room for you to find projects that will help you get through this time. I also
So this would be a question to maybe bring it back to the lawyer and have a conversation, like what would be, I mean, I understand lawyers cost money. Of course, you're giving an amazing, but I also am cognizant of that. So is that the way to go?
I think that, it's the issue of maintaining status through COVID is really hard. Even harder is paying rent and putting bread on the table these days. This is such a terrible, terrible time. And your lawyer should be there to help you navigate this really tricky business.
I have to say, and I can't speak for all immigration lawyers, but if we got somebody approved a year and a half ago in O-1, and they came back to us in the course of a pandemic and said, hey, I've got this other gig. Would you say that this is included within the scope of my petition and I can pursue this? We'd look back, all our records are digital. We would look back and say,
Right.
Yes or no, or maybe, or God, let's even come in and talk about it. Or come in and talk about it. Let's Zoom and talk about it. Sorry, I forgot about COVID for a second. Would you charge for that?
I would not, but
okay, I would try.
They're maintaining status involves doing as much as you can to try to keep your practice alive. If you're a costume designer for theater and the only jobs out there are in fashion, maybe it's time to talk to some playwrights and say, what are you working on? Let's talk about these shows for the future. That, getting creative about unpaid work to establish that you're maintaining status is something to think about and work on. You want to position yourself the best way possible so that nobody could ever complain that you didn't maintain status.
And just to add something, we at the Playwrights Realm are very interested in how we can further help international artists and immigrant artists. So if people do have ideas of what are different creative ways, I can't say we're going to be able to solve them all, but I'll ask Miranda, who's been my right hand. She's backstage helping us run this today. I'll ask her to put our email there, the ITA email. Please send us an email. You never know. As April was saying, there's a lot of creative things that are happening already. C Foundation, Movement Theater Company are doing some amazing work to help.
Another theater company that took it upon itself to publish a lot of costume designs in the last month. So
let us know. Maybe there are things we can do too. I would love to hear that. There's a couple of questions about how do you change from an O-1 to a green card. One of them is just general. The other one is specifically how difficult it is right now to go from an O-1 to a green card for an actor.
That last one's a simple question. For an actor, O-1 to a green card, really difficult. Nothing's ever impossible. Really
depends
difficult.
On the case.
Well, we have a really hostile, in our experience, immigration service right now. They are erratic though, so they can come out all kinds of different ways, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively, but
the standards are different, and
between O-1 and green card.
Yeah, and the bar is very, very high, but a lot of people in O-1 are eligible for an EB-11 green card. You need to kind of figure out ways of kind of making your case as strong as possible before you apply. I would say that in the last 4 years, we have tried to help people stay on O-1 to try to make that work as well as possible, because there's no question that in these years, the adjudication of green cards has not been consistent with what it had been before. To some extent, the bar is much higher, and there's an element of more unpredictability than we thought we would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just add that, green card is a whole nother thing, as I well know. So I feel like maybe we'll even do another webinar of these focused on that, because I think that there's a lot of interest in that, and that's such a specific process, and there are other specific criteria that will be really interesting to talk about.
I think one thing that happens with people on O-1 is that they get sick of this process. Wait, don't
Yes, can confirm.
like applying for a visa every 3 years,
Dealing with immigration
which seems like
lawyers
3 years. That's
every
a
3
long
years.
time.
Right.
I feel like our clients feel like they are spending their entire lives with us, like, just developing and filing, that that you get sick of this. So talk to lawyers about the best way to go forward. Make sure that they are, again, really on your side and really understand the nuances of the process. There's a lot that can be done to strengthen a green card case in the EB.
Another question from Ran. Thank you for giving us the pronunciation of your name. If I get accepted to school in the US during his O-1, do I need to switch back to an F-1?
No, you can matriculate. You can go for even a degree program on O-1. Now, I think as part of that, you have to, maybe you can't sleep because, you're supposed to keep doing your extraordinary ability tasks that got you the O-1, but you're allowed, and schools should know this, they should be aware of this, that if you show an O-1, they should let you study there.
Can you get a year of OPT?
Now that's the rub.
Yeah, so that's the problem.
Right. Now the question is, if you've got an O-1, why do you need a year of OPT unless you're pivoting? But
I can think of a lot of good reasons why you want OPT. I mean, and for everyone that's listening, an OPT card is a year. It's a year or 3 years of basically having kind of a green card. You get have a lot more freedom in the work you can do. So particularly for people that are in the performing arts, it just is a great thing to have an OPT card.
If that is more important than earning, income from your O-1 work, then you should think about transitioning to F-1, because that is the only path to OPT.
And there's a connected question to that too. Anonymous attendee asking, any credits in academic institutions during my F-1 do not count for my O-1. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Correct. Academic achievement is not relevant to
if it's in the arts. If we're talking about in the arts,
I think that's what they meant, like doing a show for school.
Right. No. The Immigration Service doesn't understand how talented people are in the arts in schools, and they associate being in school with not knowing anything about your discipline. The joke I make with clients is that they treat art students as they should have treated someone like me approaching law school. I knew nothing about being a lawyer, let alone being a law student. And art students are different, but the Immigration Service has an allergy about academic achievement and how it fits with O-1s.
But I would say that there are some institutions where the productions that they sponsor are major theatrical events, particularly in that area. And there are often ways to approach, and they get real press, they get awards. There are often approaches to those productions which should be considered in an O-1. So I would not take them off the table.
Right.
And I just want to add one area too, is that, for example, when I was considering grad school, I chose a program where I knew it was connected to professional theater. So I would have an opportunity during my as an F-1 to work in a professional theater, which helped with a lot of credits. And that's how I got my O-1 visa afterwards, after grad school. So I think that there's also, as you're making these decisions, like these are the types of things that international students have to think about sometimes. But this is one of the things that helped me make that decision. There are a few more questions, but I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of them. But I have one that a couple of people want answered, and it's a quick one. Does it matter if my lawyer is in a different state that I am?
Not at all. Not at all. We have clients from all over the United States, particularly California, but it's a national system. So no, not a problem at all.
And so first of all, before, like, we're going to answer one more question, and then there's a couple of things that I want to share, a couple of resources with the participants. I just want to uplift what April and Kevin said in terms of reaching out to them. Like, I've had this experience, not only when I was their client, even before. I went through, I think, 7 lawyers during my whole process of always, and I just will say this, like, make sure you find people that you think are a good fit with you and have that human aspect. And I can say this from the two of you, you really have that. You are compassionate people. And you do this as this is your calling, this is not just your day job. And so I do think that that's important. And I know it's very hard. I've been to a lot of lawyers, and I know that people that have been through even more, but do reach out to them if you have further questions. But I do want to end with an interesting question in this Q&A. Chio was asking about that their main concern is that investing on a 3-year visa at this moment, where they can't work at less than half of their capacity because of COVID. So as most jobs got canceled. So essentially the point is, does it make sense to do this now? Does it make sense to go through an O-1 process and get the visa now, because the clock will start ticking and you are basically paying for permission to work for 3 years, but there might not be jobs available. So, any reflections on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a really, really hard question and very personal. Sometimes timing is a fantastic pivot point. And that's for some people, even though the world stinks right now, it's a great time to apply. In terms of the balance of your future and your past, this is the time for you. But I totally understand that issue. It's really, really heartbreaking.
There's a quirk about O-1 petitions that it was worth bearing in mind. It is possible to postpone the start date up to a year beyond after filing. So that let's run through the math right now. We're now, by the time we settle down, it's November 4, the election is over, we're calm again. And so if we started a petition on November 4 and finished it mid-January and filed it mid-January in the Immigration Service, and if we filed it mid-January, we could have the start date be as late as January of 2022. So I just throw that out.
I mean, that's useful for employers also. They get to know who they can bring in.
Right. So I throw that out. We're all making bets about 2021 being different from 2020. We're all hopeful that there will be more work and more activity and vaccines and the whole thing that will let us get our normal lives back together again.
But an attorney can certainly help each person work on the timing issues. I think it's a really important issue, whether it's worth doing right now.
It's a good question.
I hear you. And it is an investment, and it, pays off in many, many ways. And it'll be wonderful to be one of those people who is like ready to work when things start opening up again. But there are a lot of ways to time things so that you are investing in something that really makes sense for you.
I want to now share a couple of resources just as we are closing this. As I said, we are hoping to do more of these. So the first thing I just want to remind everybody, the ITA Eligibility Survey, we close on November 1st. And so I think Miranda's going to be dropping the link in the chat, but it's playwrightsrealm.org/ITA. All the information is there. Also, in terms of future panels, we would be interested to know what topics you would like us to delve into. As I said today, there was an interest about green cards, so that could be a potential topic. So if you do have an idea of topics or things we should talk about in the future panels, if you could also email us at ita@ at playwrightsrealm.org. That would be appreciated. And one of our partners asked us to share something. We've actually been talking to the Theater Communications Group, TCG, who's a national advocacy group for theater in America. And they actually collect stories of people receiving requests for evidence, RFEs, or denials to help with their advocacy. So if you would like to share a story with them, you're going to email Lori Baskin, and Miranda's going to put her email in the chat as well, because they told us that it really helps them when they go to do this advocacy to tell these stories about the barriers that people face and all of these. Unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't end in a happy ending, but they're doing great work in terms of theater. So we did want to uplift that. And the last link that we are going to share is that if you want to know about future news about the International Theater Makers Award, this is the inaugural year, but we're hoping it is not the final year. We're working really hard to make this program even bigger and better going forward. So if you want to be the first to know, there's a link to sign up for an e-blast to get information on that, and also information on the Realm. We do a lot of programs for artists. We're having a lot of online free classes and workshops for artists all over the world, actually. And so we would love to have you participate in some of our programming. April and Kevin, any final words?
Just stay hopeful.
Stay hopeful.
This is a terrible time for everyone, and everyone has their own horrible, difficult story right now. This isn't going to be forever. We are almost through this. I feel like the day is coming when things.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Yeah. I'm very hopeful.
Yes. And if you need support and if you need information, there are so many sources. We are just one of them. But you guys, if you're on this call, you know that you're so important. You're so important to this country. You're so important to the world. Our mission is to make sure that you can do what you want to do, because we really want you to. So those are my final words. Kevin?
No, I think I can't add anything to that.
Yeah.
I think you said it. 2021 will be a better year. It will be. Si Deus quiser. Okay.
So thank you, Miranda, for helping us backstage with everything. Thank you for all our attendees for taking the time. I know some people are having some problems with the link to sign up, saying that you need permission. We will fix that. So if you check again in a few minutes, we'll make sure that it's working for you. Thank you for letting us know. And thank you so much, Kevin and April. This has been a great project already. We're just getting started, but we really, I appreciate you for everything that you're doing.
It's been
for us.
Thank you, Roberta.
And thank
Miranda.
you for all our listeners. We're thrilled that you are able to make it your business to learn more about this process. Being informed and demystifying this process is the first step to actually making it happen.
Okay, great.
Thank